I'm Andy Katz, along with my co-host Seth Greenberg on the latest edition of Courtside with Katz and Coach G. We're going to break down the top 16 with NCAA Tournament Selection Committee Chair Mark Hollis, and also be joined by South Carolina head coach Frank Martin.
This is The Right Time with Bomani Jones on ESPN Radio or on the ESPN app.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Right Time. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. You can send us a tweet at the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. That is at Bomani_Jones. So I talked a bit about Draymond Green and him saying that he thought that Jim Dolan had a slave master mentality. I thought he was incorrect when he said that, but I didn't really find it to necessarily be that terribly offensive. Our guest now, I believe he feels a little bit differently than I do. You may have heard him filling in on a wonderful week of The Right Time in late August. His name is Will Cain. Now, Will, what is your take on Draymond?
First of all, do you want to go ahead and should we lay out for the audience that I'm not PFT commenter? I don't want to ruin the bit. But
you got a better voice.
This is real. My thing on Draymond is this, okay? And you and I went back and forth on Twitter a little bit, and I laid it out on First Take earlier today. But I found that Draymond's comments equating James Dolan to a slave master mentality was not only wrong-headed, but that it diminished very serious issues when it came to not only the legacy of slavery, but racism, Draymond himself, and even the very trivial issue of Charles Oakley being kicked out of Madison Square Garden. I think when you take something that important, like slavery, and equate it to the bickering between millionaires and billionaires, what you have done is managed to diminish everything.
Well, okay, so I asked you about that because I found it to be odd that on one hand you're saying that he minimized the issue of slavery and then also said he minimized the issue with Jim Dolan. I'm like, well, wait a minute. You just put these things in the same sentence and put them next to each other. Like, I felt like if you're putting them in the same place, you were kind of guilty of the same minimization. What would you say in response?
Well, all I was doing was echoing Draymond. In fact, I don't think you and I disagreed on that. He's the one that put those two things together. By me saying you've put these two things together and somehow diminished both, I'm only echoing back what you said and then judging the conclusion.
Yeah, see, I think part of it I think is interesting is I don't think, we're talking to Will Cain, I don't think it necessarily minimized what he had to say in the first place about Dolan, because I think the point that he made before he compared it to a slave owner's mentality, which I am with you on, I don't think is correct. But the point he made still stands up. Like, I feel it's kind of disingenuous when people make a good point and then they say something afterwards that you don't like, and then you say, well, it just minimized the first point. We don't have to let it minimize the first point, do we? Like, we could focus on the first point, but I think it makes for better business for us to talk about the other one.
No, I don't think so. Because if I get beyond his invocation of slavery and judge his statements, so he judged Dolan. He said that James Dolan was happy to indulge Charles Oakley's aggressiveness, his ability to take on opponents when it worked in James Dolan's favor, when he worked for James Dolan. But then that when he doesn't, that James Dolan has thin skin, I find that obvious. A, has nothing to do with racism or slavery, and B, is obvious. You are a bigger deal around here than me, Bomani. So maybe that rule applies to you here. It doesn't apply to me, and I can't find the place of employment where when you are a former employee and you publicly criticize your former business and then you show up to their place of work and berate them, that they would not escort you out. I can't imagine where that wouldn't be the course of events.
Well, see, where I think it's interesting is I have not seen it confirmed that he ever actually berated James Dolan when he showed up there. See, to me, part of where this gets to be interesting, like where the race thing comes up, and you'll never be able to get pinpoint it, right? But the fear that Jim Dolan had at the idea of Charles Oakley sitting behind him, like him being so petrified, like Oakley is rough, but Oakley ain't crazy. He's not about to run up on Jim Dolan. And that's the one where I was just like, why are you so afraid? Like, I think that there's a thing with NBA players where they feel like they're not respected by their owners, and the owners have told them this basically in collective bargaining over and over again. And I think they have a certain sensitivity to the idea that they go out and they trade on their bodies for these owners, and the owners still look at them as basically manual laborers. Because the thing I think we both agree makes this weird, they do manual labor, but they also get paid executive level prices, and they want to be treated more like executives, but they feel like they're treated like manual laborers. Like, can you see there somewhat how Draymond Green could wind up making that comparison, even though I think it's incorrect?
No, because I think it's characteristic of any employer-employee relationship, regardless of manual labor or executive, and regardless of race.
Right, but these aren't just regular employees, are they? Like, I think we'd have to acknowledge there's a difference between these employees and, like, me and you.
How is it different?
I would say it's different because they are far more important to the operation that we actually have there. Like, Draymond Green is far rarer at his job than I am, and way rarer than you. Just messing with you. But he's much rarer at his job. LeBron James, for example, is not a worker like me and you are. That's just how that goes. Like, I think it's ridiculous to look at somebody like Draymond Green as simply being an employee when we know at different jobs not everybody's just an employee.
So just to keep the record straight, I think we are both rarities in our own individual ways around here.
Yeah, yeah, well, you know, it's funny. On a different day, we're going to have to talk about that because I don't think you're quite as rare as you are more outspoken than others.
No. We can have that discussion. We can have it on or off the air if you want, but I feel confident in my rarity around here.
I mean, let's be real. You are rare. Like, even if it's just an ideological thing, you are certainly rare. That's part of why I have you here. I'm
not establishing that, Bomani, as a positive or negative. I'm not suggesting I'm a rare gem around here. I might be a rare turd for the people listening. It doesn't matter, but I promise you I'm rare.
We're talking to Will Cain of ESPN. Now, one thing I want to ask you about is you talked about Draymond minimizing the legacy of slavery. And this is something that I find generally annoying. So I want to be clear that I hope I'm not doing this to you if I had this wrong, but I find that there are more discussions about how slavery is being minimized when people make references to it that folks don't like. But I find that societally, generally speaking, we minimize slavery. They're taking it out of school books. You and I are both from Texas. You know that's going on there. And people complain more about the minimizing the slavery when somebody mentions it in conversation than the fact that we're a nation that knows nothing about slavery. So I'm curious, like, what do you think is the importance and the legacy of slavery in the 21st century?
So I think this is a fascinating conversation and one I'm excited to have with you. In this, I think there's a certain school of thought that if you don't accept these parameters of ideas, then somehow you don't acknowledge A, slavery, B, the legacy of slavery, and C, institutional racism throughout our country. I just simply reject that premise. First of all, if I don't believe, and we don't have to go down into the policy weeds of racial politics, but if I don't believe in reparations, or if I have trouble, many people often talk about my white privilege. And if I don't atone for my white privilege in some way, that doesn't mean that I don't recognize the role of slavery in our nation's history and its present-day role in racial relations. I can do all that and still see things that you and I might disagree on as cures to these societal ills. But it's as though if I don't accept this crackerjack box set of ideas, and I don't tick off all the box from 1 to 10, then, well, my goodness, I just don't recognize the legacy of slavery in this country or institutional racism.
Right, but I asked you what the legacy was, and you didn't answer. Like, you told me all that stuff.
Oh, I'll tell you. Legacy of slavery has to do, it still is embedded in our judicial system. It's still embedded in our criminal justice laws. It is most certainly embedded in our nation's education system. And these are all places that not just my words, which my words are really part of my job, but my personal life as well has been dedicated to some extent in looking at and addressing, not just in my actions, but in the way I live my life. I'm sorry that I'm doing that. Sometimes, running your own personal, this is like I have black friends argument, right? Running your own personal life out there is not something I like to do, but it's constantly, I receive the criticism of I don't know how to identify, and I would never hold out that I do. I'm not black. I can't walk in your shoes, but I know that race relationships is a twofold game. It takes black and white, and my life might not be as lily white as everyone wants to believe.
Well, here, and we're talking to Will Cain, and see, this is what I think is interesting. There is where you say that you can see the legacy of slavery in our criminal justice system in all these different places, while at the same time not acknowledging the existence of white privilege seems to be a bit confusing to me. Because to me, and maybe it's just a semantic argument, but if you can see how these other things are kind of stacked in ways that are against black and brown people, by logical extension, you could see how good it is to be white, that you don't have to deal with those same things. So I'm curious as to why you reject the idea of white privilege, while saying that these institutional structures that are in play do affect people's lives as such.
Okay, so here's the answer, Bomani. It's because my My ultimate philosophical principle is that of individualism and agency. So if I am even the beneficiary of something, but I did nothing to either earn or nothing to contribute to that ill, why is it constantly put back on the table in front of me? I believe that the way for human beings to treat each other is to treat each other as individuals, not groups. And the way that the criminal justice system solves that ill is to hold more fast to that ideal, hold more fast to that principle, not adjust as though we can treat people as groups and make broad sweeping societal changes from group orientations, but rather hold more true to treating us each as individuals.
Right. And you know what I think that comes down to, and we're talking to Will Cain of ESPN, is that while you, and I can only take your word on it, obviously, but where you are saying that you evaluate people as individuals, it is worth noting when you talk about the outcomes for individuals, and then when you like put those individuals together to make group conclusions, is that Black people are so often punished for being quote unquote behind for so many, for all these different reasons, while ignoring all these other things that we talked about that contribute to a lot of people's individual lives. And so while you could say, yes, I'm an individual, as an individual, you get to live more of an individual life because of the existence of white privilege. Like when you say things, it is Will Cain saying it. When I come on here and say things, it is Bomani and these black people and what they happen to say at the same time. Like that's where, to me, the privilege absolutely comes up. So it's not your fault necessarily that you are the recipient of said privilege, but even as an individual, it doesn't change the fact that your individual path is positively affected by the fact that you don't have to deal with some of the hell that comes from not being a white man.
So I want to say this both ways. I'm sure everything you just said is true, but over here, on my side of this equation, it's not exactly the most lily rose path you're talking about.
Oh,
it's not as though I promise you, when I open up my Twitter or I take calls or I do whatever, it isn't just Will Cain, you're an idiot, but Will Cain and your white privilege and people like you are all the problem. I'm grouped as well.
Oh, I agree. Your group, I'll tell you, and I'm not denying because grouping is something that can certainly happen in all places, but I do think that as black men, it does get to be a little bit offensive when the white dude tells you, you don't know how hard we got it. Nah, bro, we got an idea, Jack. We have an idea.
Don't worry, I wouldn't put it on the same par.
I will say this, though. My buddy Mark Lamont Hill, who does a lot of work on cable news, he said that there was one person who he disagreed with that he liked talking about these things with on television, and he said it was Will Cain, and he said because he felt that you were sincere in your arguments, you wanted to have a legitimate discussion. And I'll be damned, that actually happened here. Like, no, but seriously, like I think this is productive. Well, I think that this was good, and in spite of the fact that you're from Dallas, I appreciate you coming on.
Well, you and I don't have a relationship. We've tweeted back and forth a few times. We had one conversation when you called into the wonderful week when I hosted your show.
Yes.
But I'll tell you this, I have a ton of respect for Mark. I reflect that respect back to him. He's one of my favorite, and if you and I can set off on that same path of mutual respect but still plenty of disagreement, I'll be happy to see that's the case.
There you go. And I already unblocked you on Twitter. We're making steps. That's Will Cain of ESPN. Thanks so much for joining us, man. I appreciate it.
You bet.
All right, now, 888-729-3776. That's our telephone number. Coming up next, Vince Young trying to come back to the league. You're listening to ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, Sirius XM Channel 80.
Who needs to make a move to become a serious contender? Mike and Mike ask Jalen Rose Friday morning at 9 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Interesting, thought-provoking, or at the very least, entertaining. This is the most fascinating thing in the world today. The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Right Time. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. Thanks to Will Cain of ESPN for joining us last segment. My man Clinton Yates of the Undefeated in ESPN Radio. He'll be in studio with us next segment. Clinton Yates will join us at 5:30 Eastern. 888-729-3776. That is our telephone number. It's the most decorated documentary of the year, winning over 45 awards, including the Directors Guild of America, the Producers Guild of America, and 4 Critics' Choice Documentary Awards for Best Documentary Feature. Critics have declared it a triumph, a landmark achievement, the #1 documentary of the year, and now it's an Academy Award nominee. OJ Made in America, available in its entirety on the ESPN app and on Watch ESPN. All right. By the way, I thought it went really well with Will. I thought it went very well with Will. And see, the thing I want you guys to understand is I think a lot of y'all thought me and Will were going to get on here and have a fight. I'm like, nah, I talked to Will beforehand. I'm like, look, I'm not looking for a fight. And he's like, is that a warning? I say, no. I just want you to know that I'm not in this for a spectacle. Like, if we're going to do this, we're going to have a level of conversation. I know you guys are a little bit apprehensive because Will was wilding out that week that he filled in for me and I was not here. But, see, we can do that. And it's funny, Shannon, when I have a white man like Will who talk like Will all here, don't nobody tell me to stick to sports. You notice that?
Funny how that works.
Yeah, I say, ain't no stick to sports. I got the right-wing white man on here. They're like, oh, okay, cool. No, this sounds a little bit more like sports. 888-729-3776. Let's talk to Stephen in Georgia. Stephen, thanks for calling the right time.
Hey, Bomani, I was just going to share with you that what a lot of people don't like to admit, white guys especially, is that the world is probably still very much like that old Eddie Murphy skit from Saturday Night Live, where you kind of walk in and when no one's looking, they give you the paper, you know. The world's just like that if you're a white man, and, you know, are they ready to admit that and have it change? Probably not.
Yeah, they just take it, man. Just take it. Just take it.
Yeah. It's literally how it is. I mean, I'm a white guy. I'm going to tell you right now, I've walked into a store and, like, been short a nickel or a dime or something. Like, that's all right. You know, it's just that way. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, let me tell you, man, I appreciate the call, Stephen. This is the day, I'll tell you for me, the day that I realized that, like, white privilege was, like, a thing. I mean, I kind of knew it, but it really got me. I'll never forget this. One of my good friends, man, my buddy Kirk, he lives in D.C. Kirk, about the whitest white man I know, right? Kirk is from Oroville, California. He's blonde hair, blue-eyed German. His family is all cops and Marines and everything. One of my single best friends in the world, right? We met in grad school. We get along fantastically. So I remember one day, and the reason I rock with Kirk is, like, everybody's got, like, the white friend or whatever. But, like, when you're a black person that gets in these bougie circles and you hang out with white people, you tend to do all the stuff the white guys do, right? Like, you go to the bars that the white guys go to. You hang out at all the same spots they do. I told him once, I'm like, nah, man, if you go hang with me, you're going to be out here doing this black stuff with me. You're going to be hanging out with me and my black friends because I'm always, you know, you wind up the one black dude around the white. Nah. I took him to Stalls on Crans and Rosecrans. Give me y'all, Crenshaw Rosecrans. We had a ball. Like, that's when I realized, okay. So one day he showed up at my house. The front seat in his car wasn't working. His registration, I think, was expired. And I think his insurance was out too, right? He was on the way to the house. He wound up getting pulled over. So it's me and a bunch of white dudes from a bunch of black dudes from Southern California. He walked in and told us all the things that were wrong with his car, and he got pulled over for them. And after he finished telling us, we're all looking at him like, and they let you drive here? Right? We were flummoxed, right? Like, we had no beef with him, but we were just like, really, all those things happen and they let you get in the car and drive here? And we just looked at each other, and he looked at us like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I don't quite. Like, it's these things that I find to be mind-blowing. And there's, like, those little sorts of things that come up. Nah, man, you can't acknowledge that racism does exist and then act like you're not doing better because you don't have to deal with the racism. Because, like, with the Chris Rock line, ain't a single one of y'all trading places with me, and I'm rich. Like, I'm rich enough now where I can use that line, and I can give it to you, right? Because that rich don't mean nothing if they pull me over. That rich don't mean nothing if I don't have some clear identifier of how rich I am, right? But anyway, I thought you'd find that to be a funny story. And those of you who didn't, maybe I should have had Will Cain on here with me when I told it, because then you'd be willing to listen. 888-729-3776. Let's talk to Pete in Maryland. Pete, thanks for calling the right time.
Hey, how you doing, Bomani?
Doing all right.
First I want to commend you for not totally losing your mind when Will Cain was on there, because someone that doesn't acknowledge, I'm going to tell you what white privilege is. You walk into a department store, you're a suspect. Will Cain walks into a department store, he's a customer.
No, I mean, I will say this, and I appreciate the call. I'm not a suspect in every department store that I walk in. But I am in some of them. Like, I am in some of them. But, like, those aren't the things that matter. Like, those are kind of like, in a lot of ways, like the little things. It's bigger things when this stuff happens to come up. But, like, I really appreciate Will coming on here, because I don't agree with Will about that much. But I found him to be sincere in his arguments, which I know many of you did not find him to be the last time that he came on. But I found him to be sincere in his arguments, even if I disagreed with a lot of them. But I guess, Shannon, that one was a little weird because he and I actually kind of agreed on a lot when it came to Draymond. Which I don't think anybody expected.
No, neither did he.
I be fooling him, don't I? Not him. I be getting him every now and then. Like, wait a minute, though. don't know how that. Wait, what?
You can't be upset about disagreeing with him if you already agree with him.
That's right. That's almost what y'all call that Inception. One of those things. And that's what fascinates me. Brought to you by Firestone Complete Auto Care. Keeping cars running newer, longer. Whatever you drive, drive a Firestone. 888-729-3776. That's our telephone number. Coming up next, Clinton Yates of The Undefeated will join us in studio on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, Sirius XM Channel 80.
ESPN Radio Sports Center.
I'm Christine Lisi. This is what you need to know. NC State fired basketball coach Mark Gottfried one day after the team's third consecutive blowout loss, but he will coach the rest of the season. An NC State official told ESPN's Andy Katz Gottfried asked the school's athletic director if he could finish the remainder of the season because of his commitment to the players. Liberty announced it's moving from FCS to FBS, joining FBS for the 2019 season. It's expected the Flames will initially opt to be an FBS independent. NFL, the Dolphins, keeping left tackle Brandon Albert, at least for now, did not release him as they had initially intended. The Steelers, looking to keep receiver Antonio Brown in Pittsburgh for the rest of his career, have begun negotiations on a new contract with the five-time Pro Bowler. Speaking to reporters, GM Kevin Colbert said getting a deal done with Brown was a priority in a year where running back Le'Veon Bell will likely receive the franchise tag. Penguins captain Sidney Crosby tonight with a chance to become the 86th player in NHL history to reach 1,000 career points. He's one away from the milestone going into tonight's home game versus the Jets.
Want an easy way to see if you could save money on car insurance? Geico gives you 3. Call 1-800-947-AUTO. Go online to geico.com or stop by the Geico office nearest you. 3 ways you could save 15% or more.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Right Time. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. All guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. 888-729-3776. That's our telephone number. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Customers who switch to Progressive save an average of $500. Call or click today and find out if we could save you hundreds on your car insurance. We got my man Clinton Yates in studio. Check him out on the Morning Roast. That's Sunday mornings, 9 to 12.
Yeah, man.
Right? Y'all with Dominique Foxworth and Mina Kimes. Also, check him out at the undefeated.com. Also, check him out at a barbershop near you in Miami, because I feel like that's the next place you got to go to.
You ain't got to be mad because I got hair, Bo. You ain't got to be mad at me.
Well, hold on. To be clear, when my hairline started looking like yours is when I gave up.
Hey, man. Listen,
like, I could have hair.
I haven't cut it since the election. Why you think?
Just saying.
Why you think?
I'm just saying, man. Well, look, it's good to have you here. Just briefly, you heard us. We had Will Cain on a little bit. We're talking about Draymond and the slavery reference. And this is my question. And what do you feel about this? Because people get so mad at any intimation of slavery, and I feel like whenever someone intimates slavery, it's always wrong. And then if you're right, the subject gets changed. Not that Will did that, but that's how I feel it happens in the macro.
The main reason is because for a lot of white people specifically, when you think about what slavery is, where you go to is whips, chains, abuse, yelling, N-bombs. You hear all that. You don't think about the economic position people are put in. You don't think about the psychological tax of what is put in. And so when Draymond says that about slave masters, I think what his point is there is, listen, Oakley does not work for the team. He is not actually Dolan's employee. If he, as a paying customer in America, wants to show up and yell at the owner, that should be his right. Now, their personal relationship is what led to this circumstance, but to say that it's a typical employer-employee relationship is false. It doesn't even make sense because, hello, he ain't cashing, he's not cashing those checks from him anymore.
Where this gets interesting is when you feel like someone thinks that you are beneath them. Because the one thing we teach people in America is you get that money and then you get to rise, you get to ascend. Right. These cats wind up getting all this money and then wind up dealing with owners and very often realize this guy actually does feel like I am beneath him. And I feel like the part when people start making these references to slavery, it's more hierarchy than anything else. And it's a hierarchy that goes beyond an org chart. Like, even if you think that you are above somebody because you are their boss, it doesn't mean you necessarily think that that person is beneath you. And I think a lot of NBA players feel like their owners believe that they are beneath them.
I agree. And that also gets to the point about billionaires fighting millionaires, where it's not just about the specific amount of money. It's about the ratio they're making versus what they feel that they're worth. And that's where the slavery comparison again becomes apt. Slavery wasn't just about the horrors of forcing people to work for no money and abusing and tearing up families. It was about the fact that the wealth that built this country was actually taken away from people, and therefore their agency later on down the line was compromised. And so for me, is it a long jump? Absolutely. But that's why he's saying mentality and not specifically going out and calling Dolan a racist or necessarily saying he's driving slaves. He's saying where that is rooted in is from an obvious place in American history that we can all point to.
Yeah, we're talking about man Clinton Yates of the Morning Roast on ESPN Radio, and also check him out at theundefeated.com. And one thing I thought about with this is, like, you know what it's like when you're talking to like a child and all of a sudden the child says something to you and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. You're not supposed to talk to me like that. As a black person, that happens more than you would expect when you talk to white people of various stripes. They're like, hey, wait a minute now. I work too hard to take this off of you. Like, the notion of black and brown people being beneath white people, it's like really baked in ways that people don't realize, but it's so baked in that they think it's normal. Therefore, when someone says something about it, they're like, I don't understand what the big deal is. You can vote.
Absolutely. And you talked to Will about what the lasting legacies of slavery are. One of the things he didn't mention, like I said before, was money. You go to that new Smithsonian Museum in D.C., and they show you the exact amount of money that a lot of these white farmers made off of cotton. It's in the billions, like the tens of billions, like the 50, 60, 70 billions. That's one thing. But the other thing is this concept that supremacy is what makes sense. The notion that, whoa, everything at this point now from here forward becomes a stay-in-your-place argument, effectively. And that's what all of this stuff against Oakley effectively is. It's a long-winded form of stay-in-your-place. Because, again, he's a paying customer to a public event. He should be allowed to show up and say whatever he wants. If I showed up and started screaming at Dolan at the top of my lungs, people would just be like, hey, you're a jerk. But they certainly wouldn't send 15 guys after me to try to send me out. Of course, I am not a man of the stature of Oakley. But again, supremacy is another long-lasting legacy that people have, as you've said, simply ingrained to understand as normal. It ain't like that, Jack.
Well, here's the underrated part of that Dolan story to me. We still have no idea where the beef started. Right? Like, all of this has happened. No one's gotten to the bottom of what is Jim Dolan's problem with Charles Oakley. Because the way Oakley tells it, he has no idea where this came from, but Dolan hasn't talked to him in years. I want to know where this started from.
I've heard him on a couple things, and he said it's come down to stuff like, promotional events gone wrong, things he tried to do with the team when he showed up. Basic sort of what I would presume to be typical things that former players deal with teams that they once played for. But because Oakley's persona is so outsized, and because he has the physical advantage of potentially even in the field with one fist or finger to your forehead, it exacerbates things a lot. And like you said before in the show, Dolan was just scared. He was shook, and he wasn't going to be showed up at his own place, so he bounced him.
All right, we're talking to Clinton Yates of the Undefeated. Go switch gears a little bit since I got you here.
Yep.
I have a joke that I can't tell. I don't think I'll be able to tell next season that I've been telling in basketball seasons for the longest. The Washington Wizards have not won 50 games in my life. I'm 36 years old. They have not won 50 games in my life. They will probably win 50 games this year. Is DC getting on board? Because I met a TV exec once who said the thing with the Wizards is you can see it in the ratings. Whenever they give any cause for optimism, people want to be there. Then they get their hearts crushed and they run away.
That's fine. And I at this point, that's exactly what it is. I'm the same age you are. Look, I've been there with the Doug Overton teams at the back in the day. All these old squads, back when they were Les Boulay, playing in Landover, Maryland. The Wizards this year are for real. And what I don't know, though, is whether or not Wizards fans are more concerned about this team getting better or this team winning awards. The John Wall MVP, the John Wall's the best guy in the East, all of this foolishness is what fans are so concerned about. You know what I care about? Get to the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't care if nobody wins an award. I don't need Scotty Brooks to win anything. I don't need John Wall to be in an all-star game. I don't need Bradley Beal to get on there if somebody else gets cut. I do not care about the individual accolades of each player on that team. As a fan of that team for my whole life, I just want them to win. But everybody's so concerned about this national respect thing. We ain't getting enough games on national television. Ain't nobody talking about us on, The Jump or NBA Countdown or whatever. I don't care. They ain't won nothing. There's no reason to talk about them until they get to that point. Right now, though, they look good. I mean, Otto Porter is banging.
I do feel like this, though, right? Like, I hear what you're saying and everything. You want to get the Eastern Conference Finals. I feel like kind of slow your roll. You're getting a little bit greedy right now.
Yeah.
You're getting a little greedy. Why can't you just be happy that Randy Whitman isn't the coach? Because I don't think that Scott Brooks is a great coach, but holy smokes, man, he is John Wooden next to Randy Whitman.
It's amazing, too, because they're scoring so many points. They're scoring more points than any of those Thunder teams ever scored, which is incredible considering the lineup that they have. And they got guys like Jason Smith out here dunking on people. They got rid of Humphreys, my boy, the secret weapon. I'm upset about that, but they found a way to make it happen. And I actually am quite proud of the way when Theodore Leonsis, the owner of that team, has actually managed to handle himself, considering the way he normally gets involved, which is a little too much. They're all right now, man. I like it.
How did that go with you guys? You guys seem to like Abe a lot. Rest in peace when Abe was here. You guys seem to like Abe a lot. Then you got Ted, and you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, Ted is the kind of guy who just wants to make sure that people like his team as much as they like a certain other team in that town. So he and that other owner seem to be constantly in a measuring battle, if we shall say. And so the fact that the other owner gets all the headlines is something that routinely bothers Mr. Leonsis, even though he has two teams.
Yes.
So this is a constant war in D.C. on a regular basis.
But one of the teams is the hockey team, and the other guy owns, the city's team.
Exactly. He owns the football team. So there's no real way he's going to be able to make up for it, no matter how many arena football teams he buys to play in the Verizon Center. They're never going to take up the market share.
Although it's funny, the Washington football team is the city team, kind of, right? Because there's this big demographic of Cowboys fans for very interesting reasons that I love to write a book
and
on.
also, that's a whole other story. But also, I've always said this, D.C. is a basketball town when it comes to everything other than pro sports. So from the levels on up, you're talking about men's, you're talking about women's, you're talking about high school, college, all the way down. People care about football as fans, as far as what they participate in on a local level. Basketball is really the sport of D.C.
You got another segment in you, man?
Come on, man. What you think I'm here for?
We're talking to Clinton Yates of the Undefeated in the Morning Roast on ESPN Radio. We'll talk to him some more coming up next on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, and SiriusXM Channel 80.
Are the Celtics a legitimate threat to the Cavaliers, or do they need to make a move before the trade deadline next Thursday? Mike and Mike ask Jalen Rose Friday morning at 9 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Right Time. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. All guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. The Right Time is brought to you by Upside. Now save big on traveling. Get a big gift card every trip you buy. You'll love Upside.com. Upside.com. 888-729-3776. That is our telephone number. Clinton Yates of the Undefeated in the Morning Roast on ESPN Radio is joining us. And someone in my mentions just said to ask you when you're going to apply for The Bachelor.
Yo, see, this is a bit that Dominique has been trying to push for, because we talk about The Bachelor every week on the Morning Roast thing. Shouts to Mina, who's also a fan of that show. And they finally got a black woman as the Bachelorette, so people think I should sign up and try to win that joint. Here's one problem, though. I don't voluntarily put myself in positions to make a fool of myself, especially now with people who I don't know. If I show up with my boys, and let's just say we're on Family Feud or some other situation where as a squad we can clown ourselves, I'll do that. I'm not rolling dolo out to L.A. so that the entire country can make fun of me by myself. Not doing that.
How you know they're gonna make fun of you? I feel like if I got on the Bachelorette as a contestant, right? Like if I did that, ain't nobody gonna make fun of me. They're gonna be like, "Yo, man, I did not know Bomani was so player."
That's a good point, but I would have to get a haircut first.
I don't know. Maybe you can rock it out. Maybe you can make it work.
They can all see it tomorrow. If they tune in to Highly Questionable. I got the lock. I don't know. I'm trying to find out if I'm going to get a haircut or not. But like I said, I haven't cut my hair since the election. It's not exactly protest. It's not really about that. I just haven't felt the need to clean up the look ever since the exchange of power, if you will. And every once in a while, it feels good to walk down the street and have people be like, yeah, you know what? I don't want it with that dude. You know what I'm saying? I don't need it with him. You know, let me go ahead and step aside. It's right away. It works out.
We're talking to Clinton Yates, the Undefeated, also of the Morning Roast. Since you're a D.C. guy, I have to ask you, are you excited that your squad might re-sign Kirk Cousins at exorbitant prices?
No, but I do want Tony Romo to come. I'm saying it right now. I said it a couple months ago. I said he's exactly the kind of quarterback this team needs. I realize that he's a stopgap. I realize that he probably can't make it through a season if he is beat up by the line. But if they keep playing this two-step game, paying Kirk Cousins $25-odd million a year, to do nothing, boy. That's not going to be cool.
What an awkward place to be in as a fan, right? Like, you recognize your quarterback is not that good, but he's better than a guy that you could get off the street, and you know that you can't win with him. But does that mean you pay him $25 million? It ain't even your money, but still.
Right. I don't even give money to that franchise. I think that it would actually behoove them to franchise him again. I mean, at this point, if you've gotten this far, I think you have to do it again, because if you're going to end up spending the money anyway and you think you're close enough to make an impact, you got to do it. We see how these teams turn over every single year in the league, but especially in the NFC. I think you got to pay him at least the franchise. And if you sign him to too much, you know what? It looks stupid at this point. Why do one and then go if you can do two and then, maybe be out of it? But then again, that's exactly why everything's going wrong in what I like to call Ashburnistan.
Now, let me ask you this, as someone who lives in that city and knows the pulse of the place and everything. How long could Kirk Cousins skate on not being Robert Griffin, right? Because a lot of the paces I think he's received, there are big stats, but still, a lot of the paces he's received is for not being Robert Griffin.
I think at this point, though, a lot of people look at Robert Griffin as something that was an anomaly, not just to the league, but to that team and to that franchise. So Kirk, quite frankly, is more like all of the other quarterbacks this franchise has seen. He is the type of player that the fan base actually tends to like. They ain't winning Super Bowls with a whole bunch of stars. They've never done that. Gibbs won it with 3 different quarterbacks. You know what I'm saying? Bob was an outlier in every sense of the way in D.C. So I think people are slightly over that. You realize you're never going to get anything like that ever again. But with Kirk, the question is whether or not when you see these Matt Ryans around the league, you see these guys like Garoppolo, you see these other guys, Houston situation, you just don't know. And you've been so gun-shy for so long, you don't really know when to pull the trigger. I think it's another situation where the franchise tag makes sense.
All right. We talked to Clinton Yates of The Undefeated, also Morning Roast on ESPN Radio. We talked a little bit about the Wizards before.
Yeah.
We have fun talking about the Wizards because we enjoy how much John Wall and Brad Beal don't like each other.
That's not true.
You sure about that?
I'm not sure about it. I'm not saying they dislike each other, but let's just say, in my opinion, they have a tremendous professional working relationship.
Really? You remember when John Wall said that Brad Beal was his sidekick? And then John Wall said he was 1 and Brad Beal was 1A?
And I also remember when I was watching NBA Countdown the other day and Jalen Rose asked him why the team had gotten better in recent weeks, and John just said, me. I'm the reason. It was hilarious.
Are you serious?
No, that's exactly what he said. He said, I'm teaching these guys, I'm leading these guys. And I was just like, yo, okay.
How do you think Brad Beal enjoys it when John Wall is trying to impart this wisdom upon him?
I think that if it weren't for the fact that there were at least other guys around that team now, your Otto Porters who are playing well, you got other, Mahinmi, that's not exactly working, but you've got enough other guys on that team where you don't only have to talk about those two. And as a result, that storyline has moved to the back burner. However, Beal's a beast, man.
When's he going to get hurt?
What's it? It's what? Valentine's Day? Yeah. I'm going to say St. Patrick's Day.
I mean, it's about that time.
I know. You go by holidays. You get from holiday to holiday with Beal, and you count your lucky stars. I think we're one holiday away, and that holiday is the one where, folks like to drink a lot and wear green.
We're talking to Clinton Yates of The Undefeated in the Morning Roast on ESPN Radio. You're not going to All-Star Weekend, but you have done All-Star Weekend.
I have not done it as a grown man, but I was living in D.C. when it was last there. I think that the NBA botched it hugely by not bringing it back to D.C. during one of the 8 years that Obama was the president in that city.
You got a point.
I don't know how they didn't manage to pull that off. Makes no sense. It's too bad, too, because D.C. is a great basketball town. We talked about it earlier, and, man, that year that they were there, I remember. It was like, it's like the ballerific factor to the 10th. You know what I mean? Plus all the Bamas, as we like to call them in D.C., to the 10th as well, and everybody's mixed in the same melange. I'm not saying I wish I was in New Orleans because I'm happy to be here now, but the next time I do it, hopefully it will be the last time.
I want to do a documentary one year called Where the White Folks At, and it's going to All-Star Weekend and trying to figure out where the white people hang out during All-Star Weekend, because everybody talks about how All-Star Weekend is so black, but they ain't really letting you have no event year after year after year that's nothing but black people showing up.
Not like when
when David Stern hangs out for the All-Star game, I want to know where he hangs out. That's something that I just want to figure out. Where do they hang out? Because they ain't kicking it with us, right?
Nah.
I just want to know where they are. I'm very curious because they there, and I know they there because the only reason that they would ever let us show up is because they are there. But Clinton Yates, check him out on theundefeated.com. Also, the Morning Roast Sunday mornings on ESPN Radio. Thanks so much, my man.
Glad to be here.
All right, coming up next, there's going to be a Tom Brady movie. Seriously, there's going to be a Tom Brady movie.
Why?
I'm Andy Katz from ESPN, along with my co-host Rick Klein of ABC News. On the latest edition of Capital Games, we're going to be joined by North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper to discuss HB2. We're also going to dissect the new Nike ad called Equality.
I'm Jamel Hill, and on the latest OG podcast, Michael Smith and I will discuss coaching against each other in the NBA All-Star Celebrity Game, or how my team is going to whoop his. Check it out.
The NBA All-Star Game this Sunday.
Here's Curry behind the back, half-court heave on its way, and he hits it!
Coverage begins Sunday at 7:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.